Okay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Rachel. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Rachel, and then we'll get started.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and good evening, everyone. My name's Rachel Goff, and I'm part of the secondary executive team for the Trust. So I work very closely with Michelle. I'm part of the Safeguarding Leadership Group, and I support schools and advise them on areas of safeguarding along with my colleagues in that team. So would you like me to dive in, Michelle, with the first session? Okay, so I'm just going to update you around the statutory requirements to a particular section of Keeping Children Safe in Education 2021, which we've done quite a lot of work around already in advising schools of the actions that they need to take in order to address these. And it's very specifically around the categories of risk around online safety. So previous to September 2021, Keeping Children Safe in Education had 3 categories for online safety risk, and they were to do with content, contact and conduct. So the definitions of those 3 areas are fairly self-explanatory, but I have summarized them here. So content is literally anything that students can access online which might be harmful to them. So things such as pornography, websites that might be to do with suicide or radicalization, those sorts of things. And I think it's fair to say that our schools historically have always been incredibly aware of the risks and the dangers of the type of content online that students might be able to access either deliberately or accidentally. So schools have been quite robust in their actions to close down those sorts of sites and prevent access to that type of content. The main risk, I think, for schools around that is what students access outside of school, at home, on their own devices. And clearly we don't have any control over that. So it's really our duty to educate them to be aware of how and why that type of content is harmful so that they can self-regulate their behaviour. The second category of risk is around contact. And again, I think schools have always been very robust at supporting students to recognise when they might be engaged in, for example, online chat, and that the person that they're talking to might not be who they say they are, and there might be some criminal intent behind that contact. And I think this is a little bit more difficult to police because it's very much something that happens these days on phones. And again, we don't have control over that outside of school hours. So again, it's about educating children around sensible and responsible behaviour, but also helping them to identify when they might be at risk so that they can take appropriate steps. Conduct is simply, as it says, any kind of activity or behaviour on their part which might cause harm to other people. So one of the things that when Gary and I were doing a lot of pupil voice earlier on in the year, we found that there had been quite a significant spike during lockdown of the amount of harmful messages, harmful images, some quite distressing, violent images that were being exchanged between students. And so we obviously had to address that in thinking about how we could prevent that or get them to recognise and understand why that might be and how that might be harmful. I'm pleased to say that I think since then, and since the return to schools, I think that level of behaviour has shown a significant decrease. So in our pupil voice sessions that we hold, there does seem to have been a real reduction in that sort of behaviour. But the fourth area, which was added in September 2021, is a further area of risk, and this is to do with commerce. And this is in particular to do with helping students identify and understand where they might be targeted for things like online gambling, or when they might be targeted for inappropriate advertising, phishing, and financial scams. And again, one of the things that I noticed when I was doing a lot of pupil voice recently, since January, is the number of students as young as 11 who have bank accounts and who have a debit card, but don't always know how they can keep their PIN number safe, or if they get a text from somebody purporting to be their bank, asking them to transfer sums of money or hand over some details, they didn't always understand that that wasn't legal or appropriate. So there are some significant things here to address in the curriculum. And one of the things that we've been doing is working very closely with schools to address this. So basically, the guidance that we have sent out to schools and that we're working with them on is that they should ensure that online safety is a running and interrelated theme in all policies which have anything to do with online safety. So all schools have to have an online safety policy, and we have obviously made sure that the fourth area of risk is included in that, and that staff are aware and that school leaders are aware that the curriculum needs to take this into account through curriculum planning. So this will be delivered mainly through computer science or IT lessons, particularly in secondary schools, and also through the PSHE and personal development curriculum in both primary and secondary. So we would be expecting head teachers to take the lead on this, but they would delegate the planning, obviously, to the colleagues in the school who are responsible for planning that side of the curriculum. So we have set 4 actions for school leaders since September. They have to make sure that the online safety policy is updated and that everybody understands what the fourth area of risk is. They need to make sure that the online safety approach is reflected in other policies, particularly behaviour. So particularly when we're looking at conduct, for instance, that would have a very, very close relevance for the behaviour policy. But most importantly, I think we need to make sure that the curriculum teaches pupils to keep themselves safe from those 4 areas of risk. And so I think, you know, what we're seeing in schools now is schools looking at appropriate resources, lesson plans, and things like that, strategies perhaps for assemblies as well, so that they can bring this to pupils' attention and support them to recognise the risks themselves, but also to know how to respond and report. So that 4th action is around making sure that the staff are trained themselves to recognise commercial risks, and that they know how concerns need to be reported, what the sources of information, help and support are, and that is passed on to students where appropriate.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Michelle Burbage. I work as an associate head in 2 schools in Eastbourne, and also a member of this group and the SEND leadership group as well. I'm going to be focusing in, reiterating some of what Rachel has already said, and focusing in on online safety within the classroom. So just to begin, obviously, we need to capture that being online is now very much an integral part of our children's and young people's lives. Social media, online games, websites and apps can be accessed through a range of devices. They all have access to these, including mobile phones, computers, laptops and tablets, and all of which form part of their online world. And obviously the internet and online technology provides new opportunities for young people, learning and growth, but it can also expose them to new types of risk, as Rachel has already mentioned. So e-safety should form a fundamental part of the school's safeguarding and child protection measures. And as Rachel has already mentioned, the government guidance for schools in the UK highlights the importance of this. And the children and young people online, with a particular focus on keeping children safe, including Part 1 and Annex B for schools as well. So having that whole school approach helps ensure staff, governors, volunteers and parents, all those key stakeholders, to understand the importance of teaching children about online safety. And schools really have that dual responsibility when it comes to e-safety, to ensure the school's online procedures keep children and young people safe, and then they teach them about that safety online, both in and outside of school. And it's very important. I know our schools within the trust, they should foster that open environment in which young children, young people are encouraged to ask any questions and participate in ongoing conversations about the benefits and the dangers of their online world. To support effective classroom practice, as Rachel has stated, all schools should have those robust e-safety policies and procedures, set out how to safeguard against and to report online safety incidents within the classroom, or if they happen outside of school, we still have that duty of care to the children. Obviously, they need to be followed by all staff, volunteers, children and visitors, and those e-safety policies and procedures must follow the legislation, and as Rachel has said, we have ensured that that is the case. They should apply to all devices with the capacity to connect to the internet and to transfer data. That includes internet connected toys, tablets, smart TVs and watches, phones, laptops and computers within the school environment. And also we mustn't forget the prevent duty here. And schools in England, Wales and Scotland should also schools should be following the Prevent Duty's statutory guidance regarding online safety and radicalisation, and that comes from the Home Office 2021, where children can be exposed to different views and receive information from various sources, including those online sources, which may be radical or extreme. So acceptable use statements also have been developed by the Trust for pupils, staff and parents, which can be used to set rules for how children should appropriately use the internet. This applies to online platforms, including social media, online games, and staff are required to follow their e-safety policies and procedures and organisational child protection procedures when they are responding to e-safety concerns within the school. Obviously, within this, technology and the online environment are constantly changing, and e-safety policies and procedures are regularly reviewed and updated. We ensure that as a group as part of our overarching safeguarding measures. And that whole school approach to reviewing these arrangements, including all key stakeholders, is good practice, and any changes should be highlighted and distributed as well. And as Rachel has already mentioned, leaders should ensure that staff have up-to-date e-safety CPD, and this should be included as part of their whole school CPD schedule, and should now also include the 4 Cs. There's IT safety and data protection. So obviously schools must have strong IT infrastructure and data protection practices where they manage data in compliance with the Data Protection Act 2018, use firewall and robust antivirus software, use recognised internet service providers, and actively monitor and filter any inappropriate websites or content. Trust has got we're all part of this and monitoring this within the Safeguarding Leadership Group. The Trust has installed Lightspeed, which has proven to be a very, very valuable resource to pick up those vulnerabilities with our children across the Trust. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we have intervened at all hours of the day and night to ensure that our children are kept safe. And obviously the use of an encrypted and password protected Wi-Fi network. And we have a fantastic infrastructure within the trust to support us within schools to ensure that the children are kept safe. And with regards to schools using online consent forms to record consent for children to take part in activities, these should be stored in accordance with the Data Protection Act 2018, but also parents and carers should be informed of how this information will be stored and used. So things to consider include how they were used to verify that the forms have been signed by the right person, how you keep the forms secure, how authorised staff will access and check the forms as necessary, and whether all parents and carers will have access to an online system. So now, obviously, alongside ensuring your e-safety arrangements are robust, it's essential that schools teach children and young people about staying safe online, both in and outside of the school. That's recommended by the UK Council for Child Internet Safety. Teachers should have ongoing conversations with children about the benefits and dangers of the internet and create that open culture, that open environment for children and young people to ask questions and to raise any concerns. And as Rachel has already said, teaching e-safety should not be restricted to IT and computing lessons. Embedding key messages about staying safe online throughout the curriculum helps ensure that children of all ages are taught online safety skills, for example, within the PSHE curriculum. And this has been examined by the East Sussex County Council safeguarding reviews, where they have evaluated the links between PSHE and the computing curriculum within our primaries and secondaries quite forensically. Topics to cover should also include online bullying in lessons and what children and young people can do if they witness that cyberbullying. And then within making sense of relationships, the teaching of personal safety and building, maintaining healthy relationships should include topics on online safety, social media, and how to recognise and respond to inappropriate behaviour, including online grooming and sexting. But Michelle and Gary are going to cover this in more detail for the primaries and secondaries, so I'm not going to steal their thunder now. I do want to touch on SEND pupils as well and the importance of perhaps refining provision for them. They might require different teaching methods to learn about online safety, such as tailored teaching materials, visuals, verbal and multimedia resources. These will benefit all the children, but obviously special thought and attention needs to be also considered for our most vulnerable children. Perhaps a more detailed explanation of complex issues, continuous reminders and reinforcement of e-safety messages, and perhaps a slower, smaller stepped approach to building online resilience. It's also vital to let pupils know that leaders and staff are listening, and the use of pupil voice, school council forums can be very powerful and have proven to be across the trust to ensure that pupils have a safe space to raise issues and concerns that they might have. And again, for our older children and some of our younger children, we obviously need to recognise that social media and social networking is often essential to young people's lives and how they keep in touch and communicate with their family and friends. Personal mobile devices means that children and young people can be active on social media anywhere and at any time, and this can provide new opportunities for children and young people to learn and express themselves. But as we all know, it can also present risks, including the cyberbullying, online grooming, and emotional and online abuse. So as part of children and young people's day-to-day safety, these issues should be tackled in the classroom, again, as part of that open and ongoing conversation about online safety, so that they can learn about how to stay safe on social media. And obviously within our schools, we do use social media as a beneficial resource, for example, to enhance engagement in the classroom, celebrate students' work, or circulate news, activities and events to parents and carers. But schools should always consider the safety implications when using social media with children and young people, as our schools do within the trust. And again, the consent of parents and carers should also be approved before posting any identifiable information or images of the children and young people on social media to prevent any of those data breaches. And obviously social media accounts for educational purposes should be authorised, supervised by the school, filtered for suitable content, and use appropriate privacy and control, security controls. Concerns about social media content involving children, such as cyberbullying, self-harm, abuse or exploitation, again, should be raised by staff, any key stakeholder, in accordance with the school's child protection procedures. And we must also remember, on the flip side, the importance of the appropriate use of social media by staff, which is reflected in our SWAIL Code of Conduct policy. And obviously not use social media in a way that would breach other school policies, and be aware of their digital footprint. And obviously the use of only authorised school accounts to send school communications when interacting with pupils and their families. As also, I just want to touch on live learning, and during the pandemic, we discovered that Google Classroom and live lessons became that vital educational medium to maintain those connections with pupils and their peer community, and our schools did an absolutely fantastic job. Obviously, there are a number of complexities to navigate to ensure a safe environment for children and young people relating to privacy and supervision by staff to handle any unforeseen circumstances, timings and location, and the reporting of inappropriate content and the needs of individual pupils as well. And that was managed extremely well across the trust. And that's obviously something we may have to dip back into in the future. And obviously it's also been used when individuals have needed to isolate. We've still been able to use that provision of Google Classroom as well as the pandemic has continued. Supporting parents and carers. We need to remember that obviously online safety can be daunting for parents and carers. They may have concerns about their understanding of the topic and their knowledge of the latest developments, and schools should be reminding their parents and carers that e-safety is just more about their parenting and communication skills than technology as well. Parents should understand that it isn't enough to protect the children from online harms by simply banning sites or installing firewalls and filters. Obviously that's a vital part of it, but they should also be encouraging, and maintaining an open and ongoing discussion about online safety at home as a family with their children. And schools can obviously take an active part with parents and carers by the sharing of resources on their websites, new activities and events via social media, newsletters, handouts and email. And the UK Safer Internet Centre provides a wealth of resources to support this. Obviously, as we've talked about earlier, the importance of those policies and updating them and then circulating them and making sure that those key stakeholders are aware when changes have been made, so they can keep abreast of what's going on within the schools. And then obviously, where possible, organising and inviting parents to online safety sessions, potentially using external visitors. That's happened before at Shinewater, as Jane will know. And then finally, showing and sharing learning resources within the classroom with your parents as well. So thank you very much, everybody.
Jigsaw in the primaries. So in all primary schools across our trust, we use Jigsaw PSHE for meeting our statutory and non-statutory requirements for the teaching of PSHE and RSE. And that goes from preschoolers who are age 3 all the way through to year 6 pupils aged 11. As a governor, if you haven't heard your school leaders mention Jigsaw for PSHE, then I would certainly use this as a line of inquiry as to how PSHE and relationships education is being approached in your school. But hopefully you've all heard of Jigsaw. During governors' meetings, you tend to be presented with safeguarding facts and figures about the number of child protection cases or looked after children and referrals and other high profile cases. But it's really important that we don't lose sight of the day-to-day universal safeguarding messages which we share with our pupils through the curriculum. Some of these themes may seem obvious, but having a structured scheme ensures that all areas of safeguarding are covered. So I'm going to take you through a quick peek at the sequence of learning. And all schools, primary schools, will cover these 6 big themes across the academic year. So being me in my world, celebrating difference, changing me, dreams and goals, healthy me, relationships. And within these, there are many elements which relate closely to safeguarding. So we're going to have a closer look at one jigsaw theme and how it relates to safeguarding and develops through a child's primary school journey. So we're going to take the first one on that list, which is being me in my world. So for our younger children, early years, preschool, year 1, their focus would be on staying safe in school, stranger danger. So for many children who are just starting school, making sure that they're not doing things like opening doors for strangers, telling adults if they see something strange, managing their feelings and behaviour. And certainly in year 1, we would start to teach about online safety, password protection, and safety on the internet. They would also learn the NSPCC pants rule, and I'll explain what that is in a bit. Moving on to year 2, same theme, being me in my world. So the safeguarding themes through that might be fire safety, again, stranger danger, personal hygiene, mental health awareness, staying safe online. Can you tell what somebody believes by what they look like? And the NSPCC pants rule appears again. Moving on to year 3, being me in my world. Online safety continues. Pupils will be thinking about family conflict, witness feelings and solutions. Healthy bodies, looking after me, taking care of yourself mentally, emotionally and physically. Understanding that everyone is different, but we're all part of a family, and that families come in all shapes and forms, and there are different parenting arrangements. And again, the NSPCC pants rule. In year 4, continuing the same theme, being me in my world, children will learn about protecting themselves from online identity theft. So that links back to what Michelle and Rachel spoke to us about earlier. Celebrating differences, growing up and changing bodies, respecting different beliefs, roles and responsibilities, being a good citizen online, British values, and that good old NSPCC pants rule is back again. And then in year 5 and year 6, being me in my world would be a focus on being a responsible digital citizen. And Michelle talked about digital footprint. That's really important when they get to year 5 and 6, understanding their digital footprint. How people can persuade us, propaganda posters, fake news, and that links again with prevent. And that's particularly relevant. I'm in a school in South London. We have a really diverse community, and we have some of our families who are from Russia, who are experiencing difficulties because of fake news, and they've approached us about ways of dealing with that and how we speak to our school community. Family changes linked to evacuees, again, relevant right now. People leaving, bereavement, divorce, separation, and step families. Proud to be me. So changing bodies, we're not all the same, and we all change differently. And being confident, being able to say no, not giving into peer pressure, and knowing your own mind and being able to think for yourself. So we're going to take a closer look at what mental health awareness might look like. So that's year 2, being me in my world. So here we have an example of something written by Amber. They were thinking about what it's like moving from year 1 into year 2. And she has used her monster worries to say that I was nervous because I thought it would be different. So it's a way for her to have the space and the language to express her worries. The school leaders have the freedom to adapt and change the scheme to work within their own context. And of course, like all good safeguarding practice, you'll see that there's an overlap between this subject and other curriculum areas such as computing, RE, English, PE, the list goes on. So going back to the pants rule. Pantosaurus is a character who was created by the NSPCC, and the character was created to help teachers and parents to help their children to understand that their body belongs to them. And that's a really important message that we teach in primary schools. PANTS is an acronym. So the P stands for privates are private. The A stands for always remember your body belongs to you. N, no means no. T, talk about secrets that upset you. And S, speak up, someone can help. There's a really catchy song that goes with the Pantosaurus character. But as a governor, if you were going in and you wanted to find out what children know, a good question might be, do you know the pants rule? And that should be a question that could be used in any of the primary schools in our trust. So in terms of, as a governor, what questions might you ask around PSHE, around Jigsaw, around relationships and sex education? Do you have an overview of safeguarding across the curriculum? So asking your leaders, do they have a picture? Can they show you what safeguarding looks like across the curriculum? How are safeguarding themes covered in assemblies? Particularly in primary school, assemblies are a key way of getting those safeguarding messages across. When are Jigsaw lessons taught? How long are the lessons and how are they evidenced? They might not have evidence for everything, because quite often a PSHE Jigsaw lesson might be in the form of a circle time where there's discussion, but there might be other evidence that they have to support the way that PSHE is being taught in the school. Are these themes and messages revisited? When and how? So, once a message has been taught, are the school remembering to revisit that? And this goes back to what Michelle and Rachel said about that drip teaching, particularly of online messages, but just general messages. Do you use any outside agencies to support your PSHE offer? Do the school get the NSPCC in or anyone else to support what they're teaching? What training and support is in place for teachers delivering sensitive areas of the curriculum? As well as your planned curriculum, do you ever put in place responsive sessions based on global or local events? And do you have evidence of pupil voice? Again, going back to what Michelle said, what our pupils say is really powerful, and it's important that the leaders in your school are finding out what the pupils think, what they know, and then have there been any actions as a result of pupil voice?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gary Sayers. I'm one of the deputies at Westland Secondary School and also a member of the Safeguarding Leadership Team. I don't know about anyone else, but Michelle, I'm very disappointed that you didn't sing the Pants song to us, because I think everyone was waiting for that rendition. So maybe another time we'll get practicing, we could do it together. I'm going to be talking about how Jigsaw works in the secondaries, and some of these things that I'm going to be presenting on will mirror what Michelle just said in her section. Some of them, however, have subtle differences, and some are quite different in certain elements. I'm going to start by looking at kind of a bit more of an umbrella approach in secondaries, where obviously there's specific lessons that students will move to. And in our secondaries, there is a variety of different names for these lessons, ranging from values, personal development, sphere, and probably many more that I can't think of right now. But essentially, those subjects, more often than not, cover these four and other main areas. So looking at the RSE curriculum, looking at the PSHE curriculum, citizenship sits within there. RE sometimes sits within this subject area, but in some of our secondaries it is delivered through a different means. And in some of our secondaries as well, careers links quite nicely with this subject area too. So because we're talking about, excuse me, the Jigsaw curriculum, I thought we would hone in on the RSE curriculum and start with what the statutory guidance tells schools that needs to be covered. So I don't know if you've had sight of the statutory guidance, but essentially for both of the primary and the secondary phase, there is a list of things that schools must have delivered. And this is where the Jigsaw curriculum, as I'll explain in a moment, works really nicely. So you can see that the guidance separates what needs to be learned into those 5 main areas: families, respectful relationships, including friendships, online and media, being safe, and intimate and sexual relationships, including sexual health. And you can see within there the specific things. It's not everything that's written in the guidance, but I pulled out the main things for you that captures what the guidance is expecting secondary schools to have taught secondary children by the end of year 11. So very much like, you can whiz through all of these, Michelle, please, thank you. Very much like Michelle just presented, the Jigsaw curriculum uses these 6 main themes. So you can see what they are, and again, you can see some similarities to what we just saw with the primaries. However, there are some slight differences. So careers fits nicely into the dreams and goals theme, but we've still got the being me and my world. We've got the healthy me, about celebrating differences, how bodies are changing and how I'm changing as a person within the changing me section, and also relationships, as we would expect to see there. Next slide, thank you. Within the guidance from the government, you'll also see that there are certain elements of the law that need to be taught to our students, that they leave secondary school and throughout their journey in secondary school, they understand the law surrounding all of those topics, ranging from the law surrounding marriage, abortion, pornography, gender identity, hate crime, and FGM, female genital mutilation, which, as you can appreciate, if you look at all of those different areas just on one slide, there were some very sensitive areas that need to be explored with our students at secondary school. So therefore, I'm going to end like Michelle did by looking at some key lines of inquiry for you as governors. But one of them would be about how those sensitive areas are being delivered. If we look at one more area of the statutory guidance, and Michelle was talking about this earlier, physical health and mental well-being, again, is something that schools are expected to be delivering. And again, I've separated it on this slide so that you can see how the different categories of physical health and mental well-being are laid out, and how the Jigsaw curriculum and other areas of the curriculum will lend itself well to delivering and exploring these areas with our youngsters. So several of the things that Michelle and I have talked about already, you will see them dotted around on this slide. Okay, so one by one, we'll have a look at these. What I thought would be really helpful is many of these are taken from the work that Rachel talked about earlier that she does, and also that I've done and the Safeguarding Leadership Group does across our schools. So the first one, and Michelle talked about this earlier, about showing you the curriculum map or overview for that area of the school. So not just for RSE, but for the whole area, because it all just links and intertwines nicely. And it's really about here, about you be feeling reassured that all of those statutory requirements for schools are covered within the curriculum somewhere. What the Trust have done to support schools with this is provide them with audit tools to be able to make sure that all of those statutory requirements are plugged into the curriculum somewhere. So leaders within the schools that you are a governor for should be able to navigate those tools with agility, and should instill that confidence in you that everything is catered for, everything's in the right place, and you feel reassured at the end of your conversation, your visit, your meeting, that the curriculum does address what it is expected to address. Who is in charge of the curriculum area? This is particularly important because I personally believe, and I know through many conversations that we've had through the leadership group and that I've had with Rachel as well, is about the seniority and the capacity of this leader, because there is an enormous amount of responsibility on their shoulders, not only in terms of the statutory requirements and the curriculum design, but also how it's being delivered and the quality of what's being delivered, probably in most of our secondaries through a wide range of members of staff, not all of whom will be specialists in that area, which I will cover in one of the other pop-ups in a second. Curriculum time. Now, in secondaries, I'm sure you can all appreciate curriculum time is a premium, and many schools find themselves in a real predicament to try and find the space to deliver the vast range of things that are expected through the things that we've been talking about this evening. So it's about where the curriculum time lies and what subject it's delivered through. And if some schools, my own included, find that there's not quite enough time, sometimes they'll use what are called drop-down days or focus days or other variety of skillful strategies. So that question would centre around when are they and who is it that delivers them. I've got one later on that will come up about visiting speakers, but linking to the next one about who teaches the subject, I know from personal experience through many of our secondary schools in the trust, my own included, we have got non-specialists who are delivering this subject area. And that's fine, that is fine. But what I would suggest as governors that your line of inquiry would be is how are those non-specialists supported in terms of not only their knowledge and expertise, but also in how they would navigate the exploration side of some of these really sensitive topics with students. What CPD are they given of how to manage those difficult conversations, how to manage a question or a disclosure from a child? And in many aspects, there would be a huge advantage if the members of staff delivering this could be safeguarding staff, for example, DSLs. That is something that I've set up in my school, where the DSLs teach a vast amount of this subject area. So they naturally have those skills and that expertise that they can draw upon. I appreciate that not all schools have that available to them. So it's just about the effective CPD that you can provide. Visiting experts I mentioned a moment ago, one that we are very keen to be using across the trust, and more schools are buying into this, is the School of Sexuality Education. I think we might have mentioned them in a previous governor training session, but they are an excellent organisation. They do cost money and schools will have to factor that into their annual budget, but they've been used across a few of our schools. Rachel and I have seen them in action within our schools, and we were very impressed by how they were able to engage with the students, how they were able to kind of deflate any should I say silliness or comment making that that some of our secondary students might be enticed to make, and how they dealt with some of the misconceptions that students had surrounding particularly the RSE curriculum. Michelle, did you want to put the last two up for me? Thank you. I think a real importance for secondaries and probably primaries as well, Michelle, I'm sure you would agree, is that the leadership team making sure that this is a priority for them. It is a huge part of school life for our students. So maybe it will be good to inquire about whether or not this area of the curriculum is quoted and included within the SIP, about what quality assurance procedures are in place, and who is it within the leadership team that line manages the subject lead or head of department or the person that's in charge of this area of the curriculum. The last point refers to student voice that we've talked about quite a bit already this evening, but it's about what students will tell you about, and school leaders about their experiences in this area of the curriculum. And does that stack up to what school leaders will tell you as their narrative about education? And whether or not school leaders are using what students are telling them and possibly yourself in order to reflect upon the design of their curriculum and to inform their future planning.
What's in your pants belongs only to you. Your pants cover up your private